common misconception that Islam arrived in the UK fairly recently, probably sometime within the last 60 or 70 years. But in fact, British people were embracing Islam over 500 years ago. I want to find out about this forgotten history because as a British convert to Islam, these early British Muslims are a part of my heritage, an important link between Western culture and Islamic beliefs. To shed some light on this, I'll trace the history of Islam from the Arab world through Andalusia and eventually to Britain. What brought the Muslims to Europe? How did they arrive here? And what legacy did they leave behind? As more and more British people are converting to Islam, I want to address the issue. Do we have to compromise our national identity in order to be Muslims?
عليك يا حبيب الله.
I became a Muslim just over a year ago. One question I'm frequently asked is, where are you from? People seem to have difficulty with the concept of a white English Muslim. But to me, Islam is a universal religion. It's open to anyone. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said in his final sermon to the early Muslims, there is no superiority of the Arab over the non-Arab, nor the non-Arab over the Arab, of the white over the black, nor the black over the white, except in taqwa, the fear of Allah. I want to explore the relationship between Islam and the West and the experiences of British people who've accepted Islam. One period in our history when Islam noticeably clashed with the Western world was the Crusades. During this time, the Christians in Europe waged many campaigns in the Holy Land against the Muslims. During the time of the Crusades, the Christians fought long and bloody wars against the Muslims. And now literally thousands of British men signed up to fight the Muslims in the name of Christianity. However, during this time, we still find evidence that some of those men left the faith of Christianity for Islam, the religion of their enemies. One such man, whose name has been recorded in history, is Robert of St. Alban. He was a Knight Templar who left England to travel to Jerusalem with the purpose of liberating the Holy Land from the Muslims. However, once he found out about the Islamic faith, he wholeheartedly embraced it. And he was just one of many men who began by fighting the Muslims and ended up becoming one.
The story of Islam in the early modern period is essentially that of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire, with its centre at Constantinople, Istanbul, had only recently taken control of that city in 1453. But Ottoman power, Islamic power, if you like, was one that was feared by Europeans, whether Catholics or Protestants, right through until late 17th, early 18th centuries. It's often assumed that Islamic power in the West really ends after the Battle of Poitiers in 756 and the defeat of Islamic armies by Charles Martel. In fact, the threat of Muslim power in Europe is still remarkably strong as late as the 17th century, with the siege of Vienna in 1683, only narrowly bringing a Christian success.
Traces of Britain's Islamic heritage can be found as early as the 8th century AD. Now, this was only 100 years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. In England, a gold coin was unearthed that dates back to the reign of King Offa of Mercia, who reigned from 757 to 796 AD. On this coin, we can see the inscription of the Islamic Declaration of Faith in Arabic, La ilaha illallah, there is no God save Allah. There are a number of different theories to explain why this coin would exist. One is that King Offa had these coins minted in order to trade more easily with the Muslims. There is another that he did this deliberately in order to annoy the Catholic Pope, since he had a deal with the Pope that he would pay him 365 gold coins a year. Obviously, what could be more insulting than to pay him with coins printed with a different faith? Of course, there's always the third theory that this was a personal declaration of King Offa's acceptance of Islam. Whatever the reason behind this, what it shows us is that Islam and Islamic culture had already reached Great Britain only 100 years after the death of the Prophet. After the spread of Islam throughout the Arab world, Islam began to spread north into Europe. The Muslims established a stronghold in what was then called Andalusia, now the present-day country of Spain. As a first step towards uncovering the history of Muslims in Europe, I asked a number of scholars and historians, how did the Muslims come to Andalusia?
Initially, Muslims came to Andalusia during the time of the fall of the Umayyad dynasty. And Abdul Rahman al-Dakhili, he was the first person that actually entered into Andalusia.
Well, the first thing that Muslims crossed the Gibraltar Strait, and that was about the year 700 CE. And within 6 months, they established themselves in what is known now as Spain and most of Portugal. And there they stayed 800 years.
As a consequence of this presence in Andalusia, many important philosophical and technological ideas spread across Europe. One man who made use of the knowledge preserved in Andalusia's libraries was Michael Scott, known as the Wizard. He travelled from Scotland to Toledo, where he learned Arabic and translated most of the philosophical works of classical Greek and Muslim thinkers, such as Aristotle and Avicenna, into English. With all of this Islamic knowledge available in Europe, did any of it reach Britain? I decided to do some research to see if I could uncover the first British convert to Islam. When would you say the first English person converted to Islam? If you were to ask me, I probably would have guessed sometime within the last 100 years. But I found this book in our library, Islam in Britain, 1558 to 1685, and it states, the first English convert to Islam, whose name survives in an English source, the voyage made to Tripolis, 1583, was a servant, a son of a yeoman of our Queen's Guard. His name was John Nelson. 1583. Now, I studied history all throughout my education, but Islam was never mentioned. And this got me thinking, has Islam become our lost heritage?
As we know from the influx of knowledge that came through the Muslim world through the duct of Andalusia and into Latin Europe, there's no doubt that the emphasis that took place there was extremely huge, and something that which hasn't really been attributed even to our present times. There's many books written on this particular subject by Muslims and non-Muslims. I suggest people maybe get hold of Aristotle's Children by Professor Rubinstein, and another book, The Rise of Colleges by George Makdisi. All of these books, they point towards the fact that the influx of knowledge that came through the Muslim sources into Andalusia finally ended up in the universities and the colleges and the monasteries of Western intellectuals and theologians of that time.
The Muslims left very impressive